All right, welcome to technical session number 35. As we have knocked out all of our 1001 sessions, from this point on, everything we talk about will be 1002 related with regards to our technical sessions. Today, or this morning, we're going to be talking about Windows networking. Our objectives for this particular technical session are to be able to configure Windows networking, differentiate between administrative shares and network shares, recognize how to establish network connections, and configure network card properties. Now, in, I believe, Windows 10, 8, 8.1, and 7, there are three main types of networks you can choose from. You have what are called work groups, you have home groups, and you have domains. Small business, small home offices typically would fall more into the work group, home group area, whereas enterprise settings, you would get more into the domain networks. So work groups tend to be the most basic and simple of the three that you have allowed. Typically, you only allow a certain amount of computers, maximum 20, although probably half that if you want to remain extremely efficient. They have no centralized control over the network. Every system itself is equal. So it's peer-to-peer. There's no actual server that's providing or sharing those resources. Each computer is sharing its own individual resources. The default name is called workgroup. Obviously, you probably want to change that when you get going, but that is what is set up. Every computer on the workgroup needs to have the exact same name in order to be able to share files, resources, internet, all that kind of fun stuff. Here's where it gets ugly for IT. Each computer must maintain a list of usernames and passwords for all the users in the workgroup. So every time you change a single password, you have to change that password on all the computers. So if you have 10 users, 10 computers, that's 100 passwords you're probably going to have to change every 3 months. So not fun from an IT perspective. Yes, Jessica.
You sure it's not us? Because whenever I was working any job, you know, it was annoying when you come, especially if you're late, you try to log in and please update your password. You're like, So what password exactly is IT updated? Because I felt like I had a lot of passwords.
Domain is a little different. So likely if you were going into Office and logging in, you were operating typically off of a domain. If you were operating in a very, very small company, like 10 to 20 employees, you might be working in a work group. And then the IT person who would likely be wearing, 20 different hats at that point, you would update the sign-in and password on your computer, but then IT may have to update it on every other computer in the office. So that everyone has access.
Okay, thanks.
So no problem. And why is it always seems that your password needs to be changed like the day before a long weekend so that you can change it and then spend the entire weekend diligently trying to forget that password. So when you come in on Monday, it doesn't work anymore. I don't know why that is. It just seems to always work out that way. All right, so here's basically what it would look like when you have it set up in your system settings on your control panel. You see down here at the bottom, there is the generic work group name, which you can change or update as you see fit. All right, next up is our home group, which is kind of set up for a small number of users, allow for easy sharing of files. Many of you probably already have this set up where you're sharing a computer or a printer at your house, or I guess some of you may have a setup like I do where I have one computer, but it shares all the media for the entire house. So people don't have to have like the movies or all that stuff downloaded to their devices. They can literally just log in, link to my computer, and then stream from my computer if they want to look at photos, music, movies, what have you. So all of that is linked to a particular device. It allows you to connect a group of computers using common passwords, or you can choose not to use a password and no special usernames are required. Obviously, this is the significantly less secure option. It allows you to share your libraries with consent, like your music, your pictures, your videos, things like that, not specific folders, unfortunately. It has its own applet on the control panel, and it requires at least Windows 7 or above to operate. Here's what it looks like. You can set up the settings however you see fit. If you only want to share videos or you only want to share printers or something like that, you can select whatever one of these items you wish to set up. You can set up your sign-in and password as well. So if you have guests on your network, they don't instantly have access to your home group because, if we have friends come over, if we have relatives visiting or what have you, when they come over, we may want to allow them access to the internet just to be nice. But we may not want them necessarily to have access to all of our systems. So this would be one way to limit that. All right, domains. This is more of a client server network. It is not peer-to-peer like your home group or work group. It is implemented on much larger networks, private ones, like colleges, corporations, basically on enterprise levels. It forms logical groups and is controlled through a centralized directory or database of user account information and security policies for the entire group of computers. Windows Server typically is the domain controller and uses a directory database called Active Directory. Getting some practice in Active Directory, if you get a chance, really, really helpful in the IT world. It's definitely something you would like on your resume. I have experience with Active Directory. It doesn't necessarily have to be on an enterprise level. It could be just be in your house, operating off of Active Directory in your house. But getting some experience with it, very useful, very nice to have on your resume. All right. One of the benefits of this is I'm not tailored or stuck to a specific computer. I can jump into almost any computer and still have access to all my resources. So if my computer is down, Mark's at lunch, I can jump onto Mark's computer, sign into my name and password, and then I still have access to all my resources. And my sign-in and password will work on Mark's computer specifically because he's on the same domain as me. All right, now on the domain, you can select particular folders that you wish to share. Right click on it to get to its properties. You get to the sharing tab and you can go to advanced sharing, and then you can decide the permissions. Can they just look at the file? Can they read and write to the file? Can they execute from the file? There's varying levels of permissions. You can set them for each person. Like you may only want read, write, and execute to be for you. Your group may have read and write. And then everybody outside of your group may just be set to be able to read it. Or you can have it so they can't see it. Now I know what you're thinking. It's that question that always comes up. Is there a way we can practice this? Absolutely. There's a test out lab. And I believe a Coursera lab that all gets into this. I believe Coursera even goes the extra mile and shows you how to do it in Linux too. Julian, you misspelled tremendous. I'm just saying. So, all right. Next, here's just kind of showing you what it looks like in the Windows under computer management. All right, administrative shares. These are essentially created on the servers running Windows and on the network for administrative purposes. They can differ slightly depending on the operating system, obviously, but they tend to end with this $sign. Every time you see that $sign, that should instantly key in your mind administrative share. And typically each volume that you create, we'll get into volumes here when we talk about implementing hard drives this afternoon. So you would have like your D, your C $sign, your D $sign, depending on your volumes and what you name them. And they are created for use by administrators and usually require your administrative privileges to be able to access them. All right, network shares exist in the network, but can be mapped to and appear as if they are local. So you can have a network share drive for the entire office, and it could be like share drive Z, but you can map to it, mapping a network drive. It's, I know many of you are sitting there going, oh my goodness, how would we go about doing this? Is there a lab? Yes, there is. There is a lab for mapping network drives. And I think it goes through multiple ways of doing it, both in command line and through Windows GUI system. But once you've mapped that network drive, it will appear in your computer as if it is a local drive to your system. All right, I'm going to move this to students play because my sound still isn't working. Move through the video at your own pace. All right, so whenever you connect to a network for the first time, many of you may have seen it, there's a little warning window that'll pop up and it'll ask you, is this a public network, your home network, or your work network? This kind of like helps adjust some of the security settings with regards to your networking. So when you go into a public network, network discovery is turned off, so it's not going to look for other people on that network. It is going to assume, since it is a public network, that you only want to connect to the gateway device to get out to the internet. You're not interested in talking to anybody else on that public network. So it's going to kind of shut that down. Home network, the network discovery is on. It's going to be looking for other devices on that network, and it's going to assume that there is a high level of trust between you and those network devices. Then you have your work network. It is turned on. You can join the domain, but you cannot join a home group on a network, on a work group. So in your home network, you're allowed to interact with your home group. On a work network, no. So it is important which one of these you select when you connect to a network for the first time. And this is what that screen looks like. All right, establishing a network connection. you can hit the little network icon down in the bottom right. If you're on a Windows, which is, what is that called? The bottom right hand side of your computer screen. Just got two different names.
Notification area.
Also called. So we got one of the names, having that post-holiday amnesia sets in. Getting closer. Our taskbar, but specifically that bottom right area. So notification area, or man, I think we're gonna have a 10:01 marathon. Trey something.
Yeah, something Trey, something Trey.
Is that
Is it the action zone? Is that what you're talking about?
are you saying Trey like in the French sense? You know, like, you know, it's like très bien? No. Something
Ashtray?
bites. Yeah, there you go. You're right there. You're right
Oh,
there.
come on, Kelly. Yeah,
Sis,
I'm hurting. It's on the tip
Sis.
of my tongue. Somebody, come on, guys.
Panel tray. We're just throwing out words now. Computer tray, keyboard tray, protocol tray.
sis. Rachel.
System tray.
System tray. There we go. Notification area or system tray.
Yes,
job.
thank you, Rachel. I can sleep tonight.
Didn't take any poking at all.
So we open it up, we go to our, you know, network connections. We can either connect to the internet, set up a new network, manually connect to a wireless network, and so on and so on. All right, so for establishing network connections, we want to tell the computer what kind of connection we're going to be setting up. Is it going to be through our Wi-Fi? Is it going to be through our LAN? Are we going to set up a PPPoE? Does anybody remember what that stands for? That fun acronym?
I got the last three, Kelly, if you want it.
Got the last three?
Power over internet.
Not quite. I mean, the OE, you got the OE right. I'll get you 2/3
Power
on that
over
one.
Ethernet.
PPP is a very old one. That's been around forever.
The point to point.
Yes.
Oh snap! I'm waking up, guys. I'm waking up. Okay.
So point-to-point protocol over Ethernet. So PPPoE, point-to-point protocol over Ethernet. And then we have dial-up, which I can assume nobody here is using because I can actually see many of you moving around. And you would use either your modem or ISDN. So once we have selected what we want, we're going to go with the wireless. We could put in the network name that we want to connect to, or also known as the what? What's the network name? What do we call that?
SSID.
SSID. Very good. And then the security key, which is our passphrase. And start getting in your head and moving away from passwords. Stop looking at individual words for security. Start looking at phrases. That will make your passwords significantly more secure. But we will get into that more when we talk about security and passwords. Wireless network. What types of security can we use on a wireless network?
We could use DHCP, right?
Not for a security standard. What does DHCP do?
Wait, oh no, NTFS. Right?
Well, that would help. That would help us with individual, like a file structure is NTFS, right?
Oh, okay.
That's more of a file structure. DW gave us one. Rachel, want to give us another?
I'm thinking we don't want to use the WEP. We want to
And-
use the WPA.
There you go, WPA or WPA2. There we go. So WPA, WPA2, and WEP. Now, WEP is better than nothing. So, I mean, it would not allow a layman to just walk in, look at your computer and see everything that's going on. So WEP is still better than nothing. Granted, an experienced security tech will bypass it in a matter of minutes. So, and then obviously WPA is pretty good, still pretty crackable. WPA2 is the best one we have currently. But again, security is a layered concept. There is no silver bullet to security. There is no one thing, one protocol to rule them all and let you, be completely safe. It is layering. All right. So once this has been done, you can establish your internet connection. You can, at this point, put in your VPN if you need, especially if you're working remotely or you have people working remotely. This is essentially a requirement at this point for security purposes, because it creates that encrypted tunnel for data transmission and regional access. It'll make your systems think that the person who's working remotely is actually there on site and will treat those systems as such. All right. And if you're doing dial-up, depending on where you live, there is a reason to have a dial-up. I have a friend, she is a radiologist, works from home for the most part since the whole COVID thing. And the requirement was she had to have an extremely stable internet connection. So she actually has a primary and a backup. So she would have fiber optic for her primary internet. And then she actually would have a dial-up backup in case power goes out, stuff like that. She can still function off of a dial-up network connection. It's not optimal, but it allows her to function until the systems can be restored. So it is an absolute requirement, especially in the medical field. If you're going to work from home, you need an extremely stable connection. So there are reasons why you would have one. And you can set up primary and secondary connections. If one goes down, the other one instantly connects or switches over to allow you to maintain connections. All right, network card properties. So network cards, in order to speak on the internet, kind of like, when we talked about wireless protocols, like where G is backwards compatible with B, but what happens if you put a 802.11b device on a G network? What happens?
It operates at the slowest speed frequency.
What operates at the slowest speed?
The wireless network.
The entire network. So you introduce a B to a G network. It doesn't matter that G can run at 54 megabits per second. Everything has to slow down to operate at the same speed as B, because we all have to be talking at the same speed. So speed is important also when we're talking about network cards. Same thing happens. Everybody's got to be talking the same speed, same language on the network. So Also, how is the data going to be transmitted? Is it going to be operating on half duplex, full duplex, or auto? Most network cards, most are set to auto. So they will detect what type of data stream is being used by your, the gateway, and it will accommodate. So, but then we already talked about speed, where you can't have the gateway computer speaking at one speed while your node is speaking at another, because they won't be able to effectively communicate if that's the case. So the speed has to match too. Wake on LAN, we mentioned this one briefly when we were talking about networking. Also, QoS, does anybody remember what QoS stands for? Thank you, Susan. Quality of service. Then, of course, mention our BIOS. This is where a lot of these things are, settings are set up. All right. Duplexing. Basically, fancy way of saying the means by which communication takes place. So we have half or full. Half duplex essentially means that communication can go both ways down a line, but only one direction at a time. So half duplex can either go upstream or down, but only one direction at any given time. Then you have full duplex, which gives you a little bit better performance, but it allows the NIC to be able to send and receive at the exact same time. So it doesn't have to send and then receive and then send and then receive. It can do both simultaneously. And then auto mode is set to the lowest common denominator. If a card senses that another card manually configured to half duplex, it will automatically set itself to half duplex. And the one that is not mentioned here is simplex. Yes, Susan.
What would be the benefit of choosing auto versus full duplex? I mean, do you gain some kind of speed with auto if it's like, okay.
No, there's no speed gain, but basically what it's doing is it's auto sensing. It's determining, it's trying to listen to the other device that's connected to, and whatever it's set to, it comes down to the lowest of the two. So like I can operate at, full duplex at, 1 gigabit per second, but the device I'm talking to can only operate at half duplex and 500 megabits per second. I have to dumb my communications down so that I can be able to communicate with that device. That's what auto does. So it comes down to the lowest common denominator so that it can communicate with the devices it's connected to. So it just makes it easier with regards to networking because you don't have to know what the other device is communicating on. It senses it and it sets itself. Because if you incorrectly assign this, they're not going to be able to communicate. Or communication might be intermittent. So if you set yours at full and the device it's hooked up to is half, they're not going to be able to communicate. If the speed's off, that could cause problems with communication as well. So simplex instead of duplex, simplex means the lines are dedicated directionally. So it can only travel in one direction. That's it. So simplex is one direction only. The only reason I mention it is for theoretical purposes, you may see a question on it with regards to simplex. So half duplex, two-way communication, only one direction at a time. Full duplex can do both ways simultaneously. Auto, it basically detects the other person it's talking to, and they set it, and it sets itself to the lowest denominator. All right. Speed allows you to configure whether a NIC should run at the highest possible setting. It needs to be compatible with the network it is operating on. There are bottlenecks. We have to know what those bottlenecks are. Are we creating the bottlenecks unintentionally by using an older standard cable? You know, do we have gigabit capable communications, but we're using a Cat5 cable? So we created a bottleneck in our cable unintentionally. So we have to pay attention to where these bottlenecks are, try to figure out how to improve upon them. Also, the speeds of the NIC, it needs to be compatible with the network it's operating on. So if you have a PC that has essentially like a 100 base T card is connected to 1,000 base T network, it will need to operate, the network itself will need to operate at 100 megabits a second to match the rest of the network. This is, you know, essentially creating a bottleneck within the network, not too dissimilar from what we said. Like if you hooked up a Cat5 cable, patch cable in a server room on a Cat6 network, you can bring the entire network to its knees because of that. So we got to pay attention to our patch cables. Like I showed you when we were talking about cables and connectors, on the side of the cable, it should have stamped on there the type of cable it is. So you can do a quick reference check before you introduce it to the network, just to make sure you're not inadvertently putting something there that will cause problems with the network. So a lot of people don't think about cables. Again, I said it was my absolute favorite technical session because 80 pages of cables and connectors, who wouldn't be excited about that? But the importance of cables cannot be overstated, even if it is a boring chapter. So. All right. And here within your network settings, you can adjust under link speed and duplex, whether you're going to operate at half, full, and speed, or again, auto negotiation, where the slowest member gets to determine the speed limit for everyone else. Wake on LAN. It's an Ethernet standard, pretty nice, implemented via a NIC that allows a sleeping machine to be awakened when it receives a wake up signal. This is so wonderful for those of us in the IT field who, when we repeatedly say, please don't turn your computers off tonight so that we can run updates, they inevitably do. So we get to send the wake on LAN signal, wake those computers up, and allow us to actually do our job. So it allows you to essentially wake up a computer on the network through the use of a signal pushed through the NIC. Under your network adapter settings, you can turn this on. Also, it's a nice feature if, say you go out of town and you need a file from your computer, you can set it up for your own personal computer to where you can wake up your personal computer and access those files if need be remotely. So it has multiple uses. All right, quality of service. Unfortunately for us, there is no such thing as unlimited bandwidth yet. So we have to do the best with what we got. So quality of service essentially implements packet scheduling to control the flow of traffic and to help the networks operate as efficiently as possible. So you would start, say, with what we're doing right now, where we have the teleconference essentially set up. That would have the highest priority, and it's going to take up the largest amount of bandwidth. Now, other things are probably still running through these networks, phone calls, emails. Some of you are probably surfing the internet looking for, you know, latest deals on Amazon or something like that while you're, you know, listening to me drone on. But quality of service can establish what gets the highest priority and what can wait. So emails, it's not as critical that it gets pushed through at the absolute fastest. It can probably be delayed by a few milliseconds or, 30 seconds or what have you. The video quality would need to have highest priority because it would start making it would be very noticeable if the video kept getting delayed. My speech would be all garbled. I would sound like a robot. I'd be jumping all over the screen, very heavily pixelated, things like that. So voice over IP, video conferencing, all that stuff would be set to highest priority. Other stuff that can be delayed, emailing documents, file transfers, things like that, where a couple milliseconds or a couple seconds of delay wouldn't really be noticed. You would set them as a best effort within the quality of service. Now, some devices still have NICs that are installed. Like if the one on your motherboard goes bad, you can actually install an aftermarket NIC. It used to be the case where all of them had to be installed aftermarket. It wasn't standard that you would have, a network interface card automatically in the computer. So IT would, if you got a huge batch of computers in, you would have to put network cards in every single one of these, and then you would have to go into the BIOS to configure said network cards. Most times nowadays, there is an integrated NIC already built in, and it functions out of the box automatically. Questions, comments, complaints, concerns? Awesome. We all got this. Quiz. Yes, Clean.
Not to ask a question, there is POS, isn't there also iOS and POS? Am I wrong on it?
That's what I called my first car.
Yeah, POS. We all had
There's-
one of those.
POS is point of sale is probably what you're thinking of. The thin clients that you would use at retail outlets and stuff like that's probably what you're going to. QoS is quality of service, which is a network standard with regards to prioritizing your network traffic through the bandwidth.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Not a problem. All right. That concludes technical session number, was that 36, 35? 35. Windows networking.